I'm going to start recording, and I'm going to start sharing my screen as well. Cool. So what I'm going to do is start some incognito windows, and I'm going to start recreating some of those activities from class from scratch and explaining them step by step. Actually, we still have some people incoming, so I'm just going to order a drink while we wait for them. Never mind, that line is taking forever. Okay. So who do we have? We only have a few people today, but we got enough people. All right. Everyone told me that this would be a better time to come in today, though. They did lie to my face. All right. That's fun. Okay. I'll just fail everyone. Okay. So let me open up. What is it? 04. Yeah. Is there a meeting ID? Yeah. The meeting ID is. Uh, there's a meeting ID, but you can just click on this link. So if you guys want it from Zoom, I can send it over Zoom. Yeah, that's it. There you go. Thanks, Andy. So Express is our first foray into using a server-side environment, or actually not our first experience into going into a server-side environment, but setting up a server on our own. Whereas before we used static applications where we had a server take care of routing and returning information back to us. And then in week 6, we would have calls from our front-end applications making calls to APIs, which existed on servers as well. This time what we're doing is we're creating our own APIs, our own RESTful APIs, and we're also creating our own servers that have routing, can send all kinds of information back, and being able to make get and post requests to applications that we've created. So in essence, we have the ability to create these RESTful APIs and to create server-side applications that then return information back to the front end application, meaning the client. So let's start with, let's see, 13.1. No, we don't need 13.1, just need 13.2. Because 13.1 was just pure Node. So in 13.1, we started off with just using Node on top of the V8 engine, and then creating our server, connecting to our local host environment directly using Node, as opposed to using Express as a web framework on top of the underlying Node structure. So what we understood from that was that there's an HTTP module. The HTTP module allows us to make requests and receive requests and then return responses. And that request object and response object are constructed whenever a request is made to the server. So remember that when you have the request object, that is a constructed object based on different parameters being set from the client. Now, we then abstracted that a little bit more, obfuscated that a little bit more by using the Express Web Framework. So the Express Web Framework allows you to, it's basically a library that makes it easier to perform the same functions that Node has, but in a much cleaner fashion. Um, so it's basically just like jQuery, where it has all these convenience functions and methods that allow you to make the use of JavaScript a lot easier to use. But instead of a front-end library, it's a back-end library, and it's very minimalist. So when we looked at Express, if you go to expressjs.com, or is it express.com? I keep forgetting. Let's just type in Express. Nope, not Express from M. This Express is a fast, unopinionated, minimalist web framework for Node.js. So it's similar in some ways to Rails, to Django, and to other web frameworks, but it's different in very large ways as well. For instance, Node with Express, it's unopinionated and minimalist, whereas Rails is very, very opinionated and definitely not minimalist. You start off with a lot of information. For instance, if you take a look at a Rails application, I can bring it up here. So I created one of my applications using Rails. Let's see. If I go into Portfolio, notice that this is a Rails application. And it has a lot of information to start off with. These are all things that you start off with from the get-go. So you have all these different things that you start off with. Controllers, they change. Some helpers can change, but you start off with the mailers, the models, the views, and bin, and DB, and all these kinds of things. And you do it in a very structured way, in a very opinionated way. So this is what a Rails application looks like. And another thing is that Rails is built in Ruby, of course, whereas Express is built in JavaScript. But the way we actually use Express and the way we're going to be using Express is in the same fashion as Rails, meaning in the model view controller framework. And we haven't really got into that yet, but if you take a look at controllers, we have these controllers, we have these models, and we have these views. And that's where this model view controller comes in. And we're going to see the same thing in Express, but it might not look like the rest of this, although a lot of it will look very similar. So Node.js with Express does create this web framework. And you might be wondering like what a web framework is. And essentially it's the structure of the web application that you're trying to create, such that it starts off with a bare bones frame that you can then build your web application off of, as opposed to having to do everything from scratch, which is what we did in 13.1. So with Express, though, if you're not using with any other modules, it still is very minimalist. It doesn't really start off with much, right? And that's on purpose. With Rails, it's like they have this community that's like, okay, everything has to be a certain way. You have to set up all your routes this way. All of your controllers have to look this way. All your models have to look this way. Everything has to be in this specific folder or file. Whereas Express is not like that. So taking some questions now, I'm going to ask you a question, and you guys are going to give me some feedback. Why might it be good to have something that's opinionated as opposed to unopinionated, and vice versa? So Express is unopinionated and minimalist, whereas Rails is very opinionated and very heavy. So what are the pros and cons of each? Just off the top of your guys' heads. Flexibility for which one? Right, so you actually have the concept of making things very focused in Rails, where it's like you can actually uh, go into any application, a Rails application, from any place that you work, into another Rails application, and supposedly, if you use the same conventions, then it should be easy for you to just go in and pick up where someone else left off. Because the structure remains the same, the methods all remain the same, and the way Rails is implemented should be the same across all of them because it's very opinionated. Um, However, that's not necessarily the case. I worked at a couple Rails shops, and they did have dissimilar code. So it depends on whether or not you're going to be using the structure the way it's meant to be used. Um, but you come in with a lot of bloat with Rails applications as well, and it's a high learning curve to start off with. Andy meant, or sorry, Karunashi, Brandon, I don't know why you keep changing your name. Lots of documentation on whatever you're doing, since everyone's doing the same thing. Yeah, so lots of documentation. Everyone knows what's going on. Again, this is if you're using it the way you're supposed to be using it. Everyone knows, how the resources are supposed to be meant to be. Everyone knows where the controllers are. Everyone knows where everything is, and everyone knows how to use it as well. So it's very important to understand how to do that. Now, Andy also mentioned Con might be each express have completely different file structure, and this is correct. Each express app might have completely different file structure, and that's definitely a con of express applications, where you go from one express application, you're like, oh, this is great. The learning curve is much lower. Like the threshold to get in is much lower, right? But if you go into starting up in Express application, it's very simple. You can just start up, and you have some minimalist methods to start off with, and you can just create whatever you want to create, as long as you know what you're doing. Now, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have that much experience with web development, you can actually, create a pretty bad structure. You can, you can mess things up. But if you know what you're doing, there's a lot of customization and a lot of flexibility with it. Now, with Express, we started off with that because it's the most popular web framework for Node, and Express and Node are being used throughout a myriad of applications, as we mentioned in the beginning of the class. So we don't try to stick to any one framework, though. It's less about the framework, less about the syntax than it is about the concept. So let's see, I think Matthew mentioned we are going to be using MVC structure in both. So we're actually going to be using MVC in both Express and Rails. You don't have to use Express with MVC, but it is a concept that we're going to be using. We haven't covered it yet. And I think we're going to be covering it when we start getting into Sequelize. And that's when everything will start coming together into the MVC-like structure. And that's when you're going to see a lot of similarities between Rails and Express as well, because you're going to see a lot more modules being used. And you're going to see the controllers, the models, and the views. Oh, got it. Okay, so Matthew's at the end of the course at UNC as opposed to where we are. Got it. Okay. So there's actually a way that you can use Express in a very similar way as Rails as well. So there's a node module called Sales, and Sales allows you to actually recreate the structure that Rails has into Express. And the benefit is that you get the speed of Node and the ability to use JavaScript while at the same time also being able to have the structure and the opinionated ways of using Rails. So one of my students did that last cohort, and he really enjoyed it. So there's that. Okay, so before we move on, do you guys have any questions about what we just talked about or anything? And again, the structure is if you guys have questions, just make sure you write. That way you don't have to say the whole question while I move on. Cool. So let's get to it. So I'm going to go into the final application. But why don't we create this from scratch? So what we want is this kind of application. So we have Node. I'm actually going to use Nodemon. It's very similar to Pokemon. So if I go here, 3000. What the hell? It's taking so long. It took a while. Okay. So I have my Star Wars Express application, the greatest resource in the galaxy for Star Wars statistics. Just FYI, it's definitely not. It's actually a terrible resource. It only has a few resources inside, so don't use this for getting Star Wars information. But it does a pretty good job in starting off on learning about Express and doing get and post actions, and also going through the request response cycle. So at the end of this application, what we want is the ability to do something like this, where I go to localhost 3000, I get this page. This page allows me to search for a character, for instance, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I get that information and it displays over here. I can also add a new character, so I can put Jabba the Hutt. His role is to be an asshole. And his age is like, I don't know, like 1,000 or something, 10,000. Darth Jar Jar. No, why does everyone keep saying Darth Jar Jar? Alright, that's like the third time I've heard that, so I'm going to put Darth Jar Jar. That rumor's not true, by the way. But if it was, it would totally be at like 8,000 force points or whatever. No. I think Anakin has 20,000 metachlorian count, so Darth Jar Jar is going to be 20,001. Yeah. Not 2001, 20,000. So use the incrementer. So if I click on add to the force, it actually performs an action where I do a post request, and then because I have a RESTful API, it allows me to then add to that existing information. And then when I view characters, then I do a get. Let's see. Oh, I think it's under API. And I get back everything. Oh, and I don't have the nice way of looking at it in my incognito, so why don't we look at it here. There we go. So now I see Darth Jar Jar, and he's an asshole, and his 4 points are at 20,001. Cool. So this is our end goal. Does anyone not have access to this? I think you guys should all have this file over here. This is in 13.2 and 02 final app. So I'm just going to wait a few seconds. And we're going to create this from scratch. Take you guys step by step. Negative? All right, cool. So I'm going to comment everything out. And I'm just going to start from the very beginning. So in the very beginning, we're going to have, if I go here, I don't have anything, right? Site can't be reached because I don't have shit in my server.js file. So the first thing I need is, I'm going to say, okay, well, in this application, I'm going to need Express. So what I do is I require Express. Now, Express is an external or internal module? External, correct. So what do I have to do in order to use it? I can't just require it. I have to nupum install, exactly. So I have to do a nupum. All right, so I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to make sure I did this, right? But what's a better way of doing this if I know that I'm going to be sharing this application with others? Yeah, dash dash save. In order for me to save it, though, what do I first need? Yes. So I have to make sure I did an npm init. So if I did an npm init, then it created a what kind of file? JSON. Yes, a package.json file. And essentially, this creates the configuration file for me in order for other people to utilize. And this makes it convenient because anytime someone opens up or someone gets my application, instead of having to do a bunch of things, get all the dependencies and all that one by one, and some other things as well, instead they can just do npm install based on the package.json's dependencies, and they get all that information. All right, so let's say that we did that. We did npm install. So we did npm init. We hit enter. We put in all the information. Make sure. I always see a few people doing this every cohort. Make sure when you guys do npm init, you do not name your package.json the same name as an npm module. If you do, then like if I name this body parser, then it's going to reference itself whenever I try to install it. So it's going to run into issues. So that can get a little tricky. So just make sure you don't name it like Express. You can name it like Star Wars Express or something like that. Just try to keep it unique. All right. So from there, I did npm install --save express, and what that did was it added Express magically with the latest version to our list of dependencies. Notice that these aren't dev dependencies. Can anyone tell me what dev dependencies are? Yes. So they'll be installed only on your development machine, but they won't be used. Yes, exactly. Well, no, they will be installed on the server, but like on your application on your local machine, but not on production. Yeah. Oh, actually, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, it won't be installed on your server on your local machine either. Yeah. So normally these would be installed like for some reason I was thinking about something else. Yeah, these are just normal dependencies that exist only on the local machine and don't necessarily exist even on your local server either. So these are things like gulp, grunt, bower, like bootstrap, minify, things like that. So anything that works on your client-side information are dev dependencies. So far we only have regular dependencies, and these are going to be used on the production application on the server side. So from here, I have Express, but that's not going to start up my application. If I want to start starting up my application, I have to instantiate Express. So in order to instantiate and start using Express, what I have to do is I actually have to put this line over here. So var app equals Express. And what that does is it actually starts using the instantiate Express function and stores in a variable called app. Once we have it in this variable called app, and this is just a convention, you can name this whatever you want, but generally the case is to always store in a variable called app. From here, we're setting the port to 3000. This is just a normal variable. It's trying to act like a constant, but it's not a constant. It's just a regular variable. We set this up on a local machine to 3000. Now, when you guys want to push this up to Heroku, it is important to note that you should be doing something like this. So let me just open it up. Where is it? Here it is. Okay. I lost my train of thought. Oh, got it back. Okay. Don't forget to show the answer. Okay. Don't forget to show the answer to what? Oh, homework. Yes, definitely. Definitely not. So here is what you need to do for. Let's see, I have this in routes. I have my bin. I have it set up differently, but when you guys want to use Heroku, then you're going to actually have to set the process.environment variables and set that to whatever you set the port to. Now, if that doesn't exist, then you're going to use an OR and then set it to local. So what this does is if your environment variable port exists inside of Heroku, and process is actually part of Node, but your node is actually going to store the environment variables from Heroku. So you shouldn't have access to your port variables locally. Um, so what's going to happen is this is going to be checked. If it's a falsy value, then it's going to go to 3000. So this automatically checks to see if you are local or if you're on Heroku. Could you go over event emitter briefly? Event emitter. Oh, no, we're not going to go over that. Okay, so